Welcome to Everything Casual, bringing you original football casual videos from the golden era of the 80s and 90s, right up to current day. Football away day stories and historic clashes between football firms. Subscribe so you don't miss out. We upload videos every week. In the 90s of passionate support, it was the rise of organised firms, the casual culture, and a deeper frustration in working class Britain. Economic hardship, industrial decline, and social unrest all fed into a combustible mix. Football became a canvas for wider discontent, and the terraces became front lines. Policing at matches in the 1980s was fundamentally different from today. There was no modern CCTV system, no comprehensive banning order infrastructure, and stadium design often made crowd control catastrophically difficult. Many clubs simply couldn't cope with the scale and ferocity of disorder. Let's jump straight in with our top 15 of the most dangerous football grounds in the 80s. Number 15, Manchester United, Old Trafford. The theatre of blood, intimidation, rivalries, and the Red Army. Old Trafford, home of Manchester United, was one of the most intimidating football grounds in England during the 1980s, particularly for away supporters. Its large capacity could hold tens of thousands, but the combination of steep terraces, vocal fans, and tightly packed stands created an atmosphere that could quickly turn hostile. Visiting supporters often described entering the ground as stepping into a pressure cooker where tension could escalate at the slightest provocation. The 1980s saw the rise of Manchester United's main hooligan firm, the Red Army, one of the most notorious groups in English football. Known for their organisation, loyalty and aggression, the Red Army were highly territorial, with particular dominance over their home terraces. They frequently clashed with rival firms from Liverpool, Leeds, Manchester City and other major clubs, both inside the stadium and in the streets surrounding it. Key factors that made Old Trafford particularly dangerous. Terrace stands. The Stretford End and other terraces were steep and tightly packed, amplifying tension. In-stand fights could erupt suddenly, and crowd surges sometimes caused injuries during violent incidents. Historic rivalries. Matches against Liverpool, Leeds United, Manchester City and Everton were particularly volatile, drawing large organised away firms. Pre-arranged confrontations often took place outside the ground before kick-off. Street and transport violence. The areas surrounding Old Trafford, including Great Stone Road, Warwick Road, and the nearby railway and tram stations, often became flashpoints. Police reports from the mid-1980s describe multiple incidents where away fans were ambushed or attacked en route to the stadium. Organised hooligan activity, the Red Army operated strategically, monitoring rival fan movements and coordinating ambushes in and around Manchester. Their territorial control made away days particularly hazardous. National recognition, Home Office, football-related arrest statistics frequently listed Manchester United matches as high risk, reflecting the size and organisation of the Red Army and the level of violence reported during the decade. For visiting supporters in the 1980s, Old Trafford wasn't just a stadium, it was a battlefield of intimidation. Even routine matches carried the risk of verbal abuse, physical confrontation, and coordinated attacks from highly organised home supporters. In short, steep terraces, historic rivalries, a highly organised and aggressive home firm, and surrounding streets made Old Trafford one of the most dangerous football grounds in England during the 1980s. For away fans, a trip to Manchester United was as much about surviving the environment as it was about watching football. Number 14, Maine Road, Manchester City. Vast, unpredictable and infamous for trouble in the streets around Moss Side. Maine Road in the 1980s was a place that struck fear into many travelling fans. Set in Moss Side, one of the most deprived and volatile districts in Manchester, the journey to and from the stadium was infamously dangerous, especially in the early part of the decade. Moss Side in the 80s was heavily associated with gang violence, social tension and policing issues. Combine that with football crowds at their most volatile, and you had a recipe for chaos. Many rival fans recall Maine Road as one of the only places in the country where they were more worried about the areas outside the stadium than the opposing supporters inside it. Manchester City had one of the most unpredictable and rowdy followings of the decade. Their hooligan element was known for fast, sudden attacks, often appearing seemingly from nowhere. The Kipak stand, one of the biggest terraces in the country, had a reputation for atmosphere, aggression and intensity. Away fans penned into the small corner section often found themselves showered with coins and insults, and crowd surges were common. Home office records across the decade show Manchester City amongst the clubs often noted for matchday disorder, particularly derbies with United and clashes with clubs like Chelsea, Spurs and Birminghamcity. Maine Road was regularly described in policing circles as high risk. The sheer size of the surrounding neighbourhood meant police often struggled to control the movement of rival groups. Fights around Princess Road, Claremont Road and the estates behind the Kipaks were common themes in newspaper reports. For many fans who lived the era, Maine Road wasn't just a football ground, it was a battlefield. You could be ambushed walking from the train station, chased through Moss Side, or caught in the wrong pub at the wrong time. It was unpredictable, dangerous and unforgettable. Number 13, Nottingham Forest, the City Ground. A fortress by the Trent, hostile terraces and the Forest executive crew. The City Ground, home of Nottingham Forest, was one of the most intimidating football grounds for away fans in the 1980s. Situated on the banks of the River Trent, the ground's compact layout, steep terraces, and passionate local support created a highly charged and sometimes explosive atmosphere. Visiting supporters often described the trip to the City Ground as a tense journey where clashes could erupt before, during or after the match. The Forest executive crew, FEC, Nottingham Forest's main hooligan firm during the decade, were central to the City Ground's fearsome reputation. Known for their organisation, territorial aggression and loyalty, the FEC regularly orchestrated confrontations with away supporters, especially during high-profile fixtures against Derby County, Leicester City and other Midlands and Northern clubs. Several factors made the City Ground especially dangerous. Terrace stands, the Trent End and the Bridgeford stand were steep and densely packed, creating an intense, intimidating environment. Any altercation in these areas could escalate quickly, with the layout leaving visiting fans little room to escape. Historic rivalries. Derby County, Leicester and Sheffield Wednesday were traditional rivals, and away fans were often targets for premeditated aggression. Police reports of the era show Nottingham Forest fixtures frequently highlighted as high risk due to prior clashes. Street and transport violence. The roads and pubs around the City Ground, including Trent Bridge Road, the Clifton area and nearby railway routes, often hosted pre-arranged fights and spontaneous street battles. Visiting supporters were vulnerable from the moment they arrived in the city. Organised hooliganism. The FEC were disciplined and strategic. They would monitor away fan movements, plan ambushes, and enforce their territory both inside and outside the stadium. This level of organisation made away trips extremely risky. Police challenges. In the mid to late 1980s, Nottingham police frequently requested additional support for matches at the City Ground, including mounted units and riot squads, reflecting the high level of violence associated with Forest games. For visiting fans, a trip to Nottingham Forest in the 1980s was never just about football. The combination of intimidating terraces, aggressive local supporters, and strategic pre-match planning by the FEC meant that away days often felt like a gauntlet. The City Ground earned a reputation as a tough, hostile and dangerous stadium where even seasoned football supporters approached with caution. In short, steep terraces, historic rivalries, organised hooligan activity and surrounding city streets made the City Ground one of the most challenging and dangerous grounds in 1980s England. Away fans knew that visiting Nottingham was as much about survival as it was about football. Number 12. Portsmouth FC Fratton Park. The South Coast battleground, compact terraces and fanatical support. Fratton Park, home of Portsmouth FC, was one of the most intimidating football grounds on the South Coast in the 1980s. Its compact design, narrow terraces and steep stands created an atmosphere that could feel oppressive for visiting supporters. The close proximity of the crowd to the pitch meant that even minor provocations could quickly escalate into violent incidents, and the stadium's layout gave home fans a distinct territorial advantage. The 1980s saw the rise of Portsmouth's main hooligan firm, often referred to as the Pompey Chimes crew. The firm before the 657 crew, known for their territorial aggression, street-level planning and loyalty to the club. This group became notorious for ambushing rival fans, both inside and outside the stadium. Away supporters knew that a match at Fratton Park could involve not only in-stand confrontation, but also pre- and post-match violence in the surrounding areas. Several factors made Fratton Park dangerous in the 1980s. Compact terraces, the Fratton End and Milton End terraces, were steep and densely packed, amplifying tension and making it easy for fights to break out among rival fans. Limited exits meant that disturbances could escalate quickly. Territorial hooliganism, the Pompey Chimes crew, often planned confrontations in nearby pubs, streets and railway stations before matches. Visiting fans were frequently caught in ambushes while entering or leaving the stadium. Regional rivalries, matches against Southampton, Brighton and even occasional London clubs were especially volatile, with incidents reported both inside the ground and throughout Portsmouth city centre. Street and pub violence. Pubs along Goldsmith Avenue, Fratton Road and the areas surrounding the station frequently became flashpoints for fights. Police records from the mid-1980s highlight multiple arrests and injuries during home fixtures, particularly during high-profile or local derby matches. National reputation. While smaller than the major London or Midlands grounds, Fratton Park earned a fearsome local reputation. Away fans and police alike considered Portsmouth matches high risk, particularly due to the aggressive and organised nature of the local hooligan firm. For visiting supporters in the 1980s, attending a game at Fratton Park was more than a test of nerve. It was an experience where intimidation, aggression and potential violence were constant companions. Even casual altercations could escalate into serious incidents, making Fratton Park a ground that many away fans approached with caution. In short, steep, compact terraces, fiercely loyal local supporters, pre-arranged street violence and historic regional rivalries made Fratton Park one of the most dangerous football grounds on the South Coast in the 1980s. The Pompey Chimes crew ensured that visiting fans always faced a hostile environment from the moment they arrived in the city. Number 11. Stokecity, Victoria Ground. Stoke-on-Trent is a city shaped by industry, pottery, coal, grit. But in the 1980s, its football ground, the Victoria Ground, became the epicentre for a very different kind of working-class identity, the Naughty 40. The Victoria Ground had been Stoke City's home for over a century by the 1980s. Built in 1878, it was terraced, compact and old-fashioned, the kind of ground where opposing fans felt close, too close. But the real danger lay off the pitch. Stoke's firm, the Naughty 40, made its name in the late 70s and exploded in the 1980s. Originally small, It grew to a membership of hundreds at its height. Their fights weren't random, they were organised, rival-led battles with other firms across the country. Police and the media frequently described Stoke's hooligan problem as severe. The Naughty 40 didn't limit themselves to home games. They travelled, clashed, and carried a reputation for being among the most dangerous groups in English football. In the broader context, during the mid-late 1980s, the Home Office data shows football-related arrests were at alarming levels. While that data isn't broken down cleanly by firm, the presence of a group like the Naughty 40 in Stoke amplified the intensity of policing needed around matches there. The Victoria Grounds layout didn't help either. Terraced ends, narrow exits and tight concourses made it easier for disorder to spiral. Once trouble started, it could spread fast. Local fans often spoke of how visiting supporters, especially those from rival clubs, would be wary of just turning up for a game there. The reputation was there. The Naughty 40, combined with a provincial ground that wasn't built for crowd safety, made the Victoria Ground a dangerous place in the 1980s. Number 10. Derby County, the baseball ground. Derby's baseball ground was much more than a sporting venue in the 1980s. It was a flashpoint for one of the fiercest hooligan battles in the country. The ground, rooted in early 20th century architecture, was tight, angular and unforgiving. Terraces pressed close, exits restricted, and side streets choked with away supporters navigating alleys back into town. According to the records, those side streets were lethal for away fans in that era. One of the most infamous moments came in 1983 when thousands of Chelsea supporters, including members of the Headhunters, descended on Derby. Violent clashes broke out in and around the ground. News reports and archival footage show stewards and police struggling to contain the disorder. The pitch, the stands, and the streets became a war zone. The Home Office arrest data again shows that this was not an isolated local issue, but part of a national trend. In seasons where these peak clashes occurred, football-related arrests were significantly higher. While we don't always have exact figures for Derby against Chelsea in 1983, the scale of the violence cemented the baseball ground's place on this list. Another factor, Derby's location. It's in the Midlands, a crossroads. Away supporters from London, the North and the West Midlands often use Derby as a rallying point. The town centre's pubs and back alleys regularly filled up before and after matches, creating a volatile atmosphere even off the terraces. In short, a dangerous physical layout, historic firm territory, and a fixture that turned into one of the worst public order nights of the decade. That's what made the baseball ground a terrifying place for many fans in the 1980s. Number 9. Leeds United, Elland Road. The West Yorkshire Cauldron, intimidation, territory, and the Leeds service crew. Elland Road, home of Leeds United, was one of the most intimidating and feared football grounds in the 1980s England, particularly for away supporters. The stadium's steep enclosed terraces, combined with its passionate and aggressive fan base, created a sense of danger the moment visiting fans arrived. Matches against top rivals often became high-risk encounters, both inside the stadium and in the surrounding streets. The Leeds service crew, Leeds United's most notorious hooligan firm during the decade, were central to this reputation. Known for their organisation, brutality and territorial dominance, the service crew frequently orchestrated confrontations with visiting supporters. Their influence extended beyond the terraces. Clashes often spilled into nearby pubs, car parks and streets, like Elland Road's adjacent areas, turning a simple away trip into a potentially dangerous ordeal. Key factors that made Elland Road so dangerous. Terraced stands and layout. The Cop End and Tilton Road terraces were steep, packed, and often extremely vocal. Their compact nature made it easy for fights to escalate quickly, while visiting fans were often penned into corners with little escape. Fierce regional rivalries, matches against Manchester United, Sheffield Wednesday and other northern clubs were particularly volatile. Away fans were prime targets for aggression before, during and after the match. Street clashes. Pubs and streets surrounding the stadium, such as Elland Road itself and nearby Beeston areas, frequently saw ambushes and pre-planned confrontations, with local police struggling to control large mobile groups. National infamy, Home Office and police reports from the mid-1980s often flagged Elland Road as a high-risk ground, due to the sheer scale of disorder associated with Leeds United fixtures. The service crew's reputation ensured that the ground was on the radar of visiting clubs and law enforcement alike. Away fan experience. Visiting supporters frequently described Elland Road as a ground where fear was constant, with the threat of verbal abuse, physical assault, and even organised ambushes before entering the stadium. In short, Elland Road in the 1980s was more than just a football ground. It was a fortress of intimidation. Its combination of steep terraces, aggressive home supporters, historic rivalries, and highly organised hooligan activity made it one of the most dangerous places in England for visiting fans. Away trips to Leeds were as much about surviving the streets of West Yorkshire as they were about watching a football match. Number 8. Goodison Park, Everton. A bare pit of noise, intimidation, and pure 1980s edge. Few places in the 1980s captured the raw industrial chaos of English football like Goodison Park. Everton in the mid-80s were one of the best footballing sides in Europe, but off the pitch, the atmosphere in and around Goodison was notoriously fierce. Visiting fans often described it as one of the most intimidating away days in the country. The surrounding Scouse terraces of Walton and County Road were filled with pubs and estates where the unwary visitor could quickly find themselves in trouble. For many away supporters, the walk from Lime Street Station up to Goodison felt like navigating a gauntlet. The 1980s saw several high-profile clashes involving Everton's more notorious followers. Police reports across the decade frequently described Everton games, especially derbies and key rival fixtures, as high risk. Public disorder charges and arrests around Goodison were regularly noted in Home Office annual summaries during the peak hooligan era. One of the most infamous environments was the Go Laddis Street End, home to some of Everton's loudest and most hostile supporters. Rival fans regularly complained about the aggressive reception, and police escorts became an expected part of the matchday routine for clubs like Manchester United, Tottenham and Chelsea. Away ends at Goodison often felt like cages, and by mid-decade, the ground had become synonymous with heavy police presence, tense atmospheres, and street fights spilling into County Road, particularly after big fixtures. For many travelling fans, Goodison Park was a place where you needed eyes in the back of your head. Number 7. St James's Park, Newcastle United. The fortress of Tyneside, fear, ferocity and fanatical support. St James's Park, nestled in the heart of Newcastle upon Tyne, was more than just a football ground in the 1980s. It was a symbol of regional pride and, for visiting fans, a formidable challenge. The stadium itself, while large, had steep terraces and tightly packed stands, which created an intimidating atmosphere for both away supporters and players alike. The proximity of the crowd to the pitch amplified tension and made violent clashes more likely. The Gremlins, Newcastle United's main firm of that era, had earned a reputation for territorial aggression. They were well organised and particularly active on home fixtures against major Northern and Midlands rivals. Their dominance on the terraces, combined with the compact layout of the Gallowgate End and Lees's End, often left away fans feeling trapped. Police reports from the era frequently noted that the surrounding streets, including Strawberry Place, Lees's Park Road, and St James's Boulevard became flashpoints for pre-match and post-match violence. While Newcastle United had moments of European competition during the decade, it was the home fixtures against top-tier rivals in the English League that truly showcased the ground's violent potential. Visiting fans often described it as a pressure cooker of hostility, where even a small spark could ignite a large-scale clash. Steep terraces, a fiercely loyal and territorial fan base, narrow access points, and historic rivalries combined to make St James's Park a fortress of intimidation and one of the most dangerous stadiums to visit in 1980s England. Number 6. Roker Park, Sunderland. The North East Cauldron, ferocity on the terraces and streets. Roker Park, Sunderland's home until 1997, was notorious in the 1980s for its intimidating atmosphere, both inside the stadium and in the surrounding city. Nestled near the city centre and bordered by narrow streets, Roker Park offered little room for away supporters, turning even routine matches into high-risk encounters. The Roker terraces were steep and tightly packed, meaning tensions often escalated quickly during heated matches. The Seaburn Casuals, Sunderland's main hooligan group, were a disciplined and territorial firm that had a significant reputation across England. They were particularly active during matches against Newcastle United, Borough, and other northern rivals, with pre-planned confrontations often taking place in the streets surrounding the ground. Their presence made Roker Park a formidable challenge for visiting fans. Even minor provocations could escalate into full-scale brawls. Several factors contributed to the ground's reputation. Terraced stands and layout. Roker Park's terraces, notably the North Stand, were steep and densely packed. This amplified the intensity of the crowd and made containment of fights difficult once disorder began. Historic rivalries. The Tyneware derby against Newcastle United was among the most volatile fixtures in England. Incidents frequently spilled into the surrounding streets, requiring police intervention and sometimes leading to mass arrests. Street violence. The streets around the stadium, including Church Street, Stadium Way and surrounding estates, often hosted clashes before and after matches. Away supporters could find themselves ambushed or trapped, creating an unpredictable and dangerous environment. National recognition. Home Office and police reports of the mid-1980s flagged Sunderland fixtures as high risk, particularly when large away followings from northern clubs arrived. Matches with Newcastle, Middlesbrough, and occasionally Liverpool required riot units and significant planning. Roker Park also had a reputation among fans for intense atmosphere and psychological intimidation. The Seaburn Casuals were known to patrol key access points, using knowledge of the local area to confront away fans effectively. Many visiting supporters described Sunderland away days as a fight before the first whistle, highlighting that danger often began well before the match itself. In short, steep terraces, narrow streets, deeply entrenched rivalries, and a highly organised local firm made Roker Park one of the most dangerous grounds in 1980s England. For away fans, the risks extended from the terraces to the surrounding city, making Sunderland a true hotspot of football violence in the decade. Number 5. Ayresome Park, Middlesbrough. A rough, unforgiving away day in one of Britain's toughest footballing towns. Ayresome Park in the 1980s was exactly the kind of ground supporters meant when they talked about proper away days, tight streets, heavy industry, and a brewing hostility that could boil over with little warning. Middlesbrough as a town was going through a difficult decade, marked by economic decline and social hardship. That sense of toughness seemed to spill into the match-day experience. Reports from the era frequently referenced violent incidents involving Middlesbrough followers, particularly in the early 80s. Going to Ayresome Park wasn't just about football, It was about dealing with the borough's notoriously uncompromising fan base, especially around the Holgate End, which was home to Middlesbrough's loudest and most confrontational supporters. For many away fans, the biggest danger wasn't actually inside the ground, but in the streets surrounding it, especially along Linthorpe Road and the estates around the ground. The layout of Ayresome meant that rival supporters were often funneled dangerously close together, leading to clashes that were widely reported in local and national newspapers. Home Office documents from the mid-80s occasionally highlighted Middlesbrough fixtures for disorder, and several seasons saw Borough games noted among problematic matches for travelling supporters. With the club yo-yoing between the first and second divisions, big visiting clubs often brought large followings, sometimes overwhelming the limited policing infrastructure of the era. Ayresome Park earned a gritty reputation, dark, compact and hostile, and older fans often recall it as one of the most unforgiving away trips of the decade. Number 4. St Andrews, Birminghamcity. The Midlands Fortress, Chaos, Territory and the Zulu Warriors. St Andrews, home of Birminghamcity, was one of the most intimidating grounds in the 1980s. Located in the industrial heart of Birmingham, the stadium itself was compact, with steep terraces and tightly packed stands that amplified tension. Visiting supporters often described the ground as a pressure cooker. Small access points, narrow exits, and a hostile home crowd meant that trouble could start quickly and escalate uncontrollably. The 1980s saw the rise of Birmingham City's notorious firm, the Zulu Warriors. They were one of the most feared hooligan groups in England, with a reputation for organised, often premeditated violence. Their name alone struck fear into visiting fans, particularly from clubs with long-standing rivalries like Albion, Aston Villa and Wolverhampton Wanderers. The Zulu Warriors were known not only for their presence in the stands, but also for staged confrontations in pubs, city streets, and even outside the city before matches. Several factors contributed to St Andrews' reputation for violence. Terraced layout, the Cop End and Tilton Road, terraces were steep and tightly packed. This made it easy for fights to spread across sections once tension boiled over. Rivalries. Local and regional rivalries with Wolves, West Brom and Aston Villa were particularly intense. These matches often saw large-scale clashes, both inside the ground and in the surrounding neighbourhoods. Street violence. Streets around the stadium, including Pershaw Road and local estates, were frequently the scenes of ambushes or pre-planned fights. Police often struggled to contain groups converging from different parts of the city. National infamy. The Zulu Warriors' reputation extended beyond Birmingham. News reports from the era often cited them as one of the most organised and violent firms in English football, and Home Office football-related arrest statistics highlight Birmingham City fixtures among the more disorder-prone grounds in the mid-1980s. Away fans often described a match day at St Andrews as walking into a war zone. Violence was not limited to the terraces. It was a full city experience, with pubs, streets and railway stations all acting as flashpoints. Visiting supporters knew that a trip to St Andrews could mean confrontation before, during and after the game. In short, steep terraces, fierce local and regional rivalries, a highly organised firm, and the compact city layout made St Andrews one of the most dangerous and violent football grounds in the 1980s England. The Zulu Warriors ensured that Birmingham City home games were an experience visiting fans would remember for all the wrong reasons. Number 3. Chelsea, Stamford Bridge. The Fortress of Fear, the Headhunters and the Shed End. Stamford Bridge, home of Chelsea FC, was one of the most feared football grounds in 1980s England. The stadium itself, while reasonably large, had tight terraces and limited exits, particularly in the Shed End and North Stand, which created a highly charged and intimidating atmosphere. Visiting fans often felt penned in, with little room to avoid confrontation once tensions boiled over. The Chelsea Headhunters, the club's infamous hooligan firm, were central to the ground's fearsome reputation. Known for their organisation, discipline and territoriality, the Headhunters were regarded as one of the most dangerous groups in English football. They didn't just wait for trouble to happen, they actively sought out rival fans, ambushing them before, during and after matches. Several factors made Stamford Bridge particularly volatile. Terraced layout, the Shed End and North Stand terraces were steep, narrow and densely packed, amplifying both atmosphere and the risk of physical confrontation. Crowd surges and in-stand disorder were common during high-stakes matches. Away fan vulnerability. Visiting supporters were often allocated small cornered sections, making them easy targets for hostile Chelsea fans. Many recounted being harassed with missiles, coins and verbal abuse, sometimes escalating into outright physical attacks. High-profile clashes. Throughout the 1980s, Stamford Bridge saw numerous violent incidents involving top firms, particularly from West Ham United, Tottenham Hotspur and Millwall. Police often brought in riot squads and mounted units to contain disorder. Street violence. Violence rarely stayed confined to the terraces. The areas surrounding Stamford Bridge, Fulham Road, Lily Road, and nearby pubs regularly hosted pre-arranged fights and spontaneous clashes, often leaving visiting fans vulnerable before even entering the stadium. National reputation. By the mid-80s, Stamford Bridge was frequently cited in Home Office, football-related arrest statistics and press reports as one of the more dangerous grounds in England, largely due to the presence of the Headhunters and the club's historic rivalries. For visiting fans in the 1980s, a trip to Stamford Bridge was a test of nerves. It wasn't just about the football, it was about navigating hostile terraces, avoiding ambushes in the surrounding streets, and facing one of the most notorious firms in the country. Stamford Bridge became more than a stadium. It was a fortress of intimidation, and the Headhunters ensured that violence and chaos were an almost guaranteed part of any matchday experience. Number 2, Upton Park / Berlin Ground, West Ham United. Home of the intercity firm, the name alone brought fear. West Ham United's Berlin Ground, also known as Upton Park, was the spiritual home of the intercity firm, ICF. By the 1980s, the ICF was already legendary, representing organised, disciplined, and often violent supporters. Unlike many other firms, they were strategic. Attacks were coordinated, travel routes planned, and intelligence on rival firms shared. The Berlin Ground itself, located in East London, was compact and densely terraced, creating a highly charged atmosphere. The notorious East Stand and South Bank were homes to some of the most vocal and intimidating supporters in England. Visiting fans often recounted the constant fear of being targeted while entering or exiting the stadium. Police reports of the mid-1980s repeatedly mention West Ham fixtures in connection with high numbers of football-related arrests. The Taylor report later highlighted the need to address East End grounds like Upton Park precisely because of the recurring violence documented during this period. Several high-profile incidents underline the Berlin Ground's reputation. Clashes with Millwall and Chelsea in the early 80s led to multiple arrests and injuries. Coordinated attacks on away fans en route from train stations were common, leading to convictions for assault and public order offences. The ICF's operational methods were documented in press reports, showing a level of organisation unmatched by many other firms at the time. For many, visiting Upton Park in the 1980s meant preparing for more than a football match. It was a test of courage and sometimes survival in the heart of East London's toughest footballing streets. Number 1. The Old Den, Millwall. The ground that became a symbol of fear across the country. Millwall's Old Den was arguably the most infamous ground in England during the 1980s. Located in southeast London, the stadium itself was compact, with narrow terraces and steep steps. It was almost designed for noise, intimidation, and a sense of enclosure that worked in favour of Millwall's notorious home support. The Bushwhackers, Millwall's main firm in the 1980s, had a reputation that extended far beyond London. Away fans spoke of them in hushed tones. Police regarded them as one of the most organised and dangerous firms of the decade. Incidents weren't limited to the stadium. They extended into surrounding streets, train stations and pubs, particularly on match days against West Ham, Chelsea and Leeds. The Home Office reports in 1984 to 85 through the late 80s highlighted Millwall among the clubs frequently cited for football-related arrests. The number of arrests associated with Millwall matches regularly exceeded the national average, reflecting both the size and organisation of the firm. Police often brought in riot units, mounted officers, and extensive planning to contain them. The Old Den itself, with its tight confines, made pitch invasions and in-stand disorder far easier. Local newspapers of the time detailed repeated clashes between fans, sometimes spilling out onto the streets of Bermondsey, resulting in arrests, injuries and criminal prosecutions. One famous incident in March 1985 saw visiting club supporters trapped and attacked by members of the Bushwhackers after the final whistle, prompting multiple convictions. By the end of the decade, Millwall's home ground had a national reputation: intimidating, chaotic, and dangerous. For visiting fans, just walking through the turnstiles meant stepping into one of the most hostile football environments in England. By the late 1980s, English football violence had reached a point that could no longer be ignored. Incidents were increasingly covered in national newspapers, broadcast on television, and debated in Parliament. The Taylor Report later recommended sweeping changes: all-seater stadiums, improved crowd management, and the use of CCTV to monitor fan behaviour. Police forces across England developed more sophisticated matchday planning, including segregated entrances, coordination with transport authorities, and pre-arranged dispersal routes for visiting supporters. Banning orders and criminal records became key tools to prevent repeat offenders from returning to stadiums. Many grounds that dominated the 1980s for violence either underwent radical renovation or closed entirely. Ayresome Park, Victoria Ground, the Upton Park, and Maine Road all faced redevelopment or demolition within decades. Some firms dissolved, others adapted. If you disagree with the 15 most dangerous football grounds in this video, and you feel I have missed a ground out, or you would like to add one, then please let me know in the comment section. Opinions are always welcomed and valued here. It's what makes the channel what it is. So, until next time, God bless. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you subscribe, you will be notified when we release a new video. It could be your firm we make a video about next, so don't miss out and hit the subscribe button. You can find me on Facebook or email me if you have a good story to tell. See you next time.